It has been 21,764 days. Since what? It has been 21,764 days since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination against race, sex, and religion was passed. This act proved to play a prominent role in the establishment of equality for all in American society, and drastically changed the daily lives of all Americans by desegregating the nation. This act also led to further progress towards equality for all. In 2021, the Equality Act, which added protection over members of the LGBTQ+ community, was incorporated into the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Since the founding of our country, America has been changing in hopes of creating a better nation politically, but more important, socially. We have made these changes with the intent of living up to Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, which stated that all men are created equal. In order to reach equality, or even just get closer to it, America must choose to stay true to Jefferson's stated ideals of innate equality amongst all. Now, all key points in America's history are derived from these vital changes that have been made. We have changed from a British colony to an independent country. We have changed our form of government from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. We have abolished slavery through the Civil War and the addition of the 13th Amendment. And as I have previously mentioned, we have desegregated our nation through the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We have seen the effects of change, which leads to my big idea today. Change is important and necessary. America has changed greatly from its origins. While recognizing the changes the American government has made in attempts to establish equality for all, such as the Civil Rights and Equality Acts, I am surprised every day by the amount of discrimination, racism, and homophobia I'm still seeing within my city, my school, my place of work, and even my family. We have made progress with change, but there is still change to be made. While laws and acts have been created to allow this change to happen, society needs to recognize that these need to be implemented. In order to do this, we must first take a step back and look at the amount of discrimination still taking place in America. Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, otherwise known as GLAAD, conducts an annual survey to see how the American society perceives and treats the LGBTQ community, and how in turn this affects the members of the community. In 2022, GLAAD found that 70% of all members faced some form of discrimination that year. To put this number into context for you, this is an 11% increase from 2021, the year that the Equality Act, which prohibited such discrimination, was passed. So yes, we can acknowledge the milestone that the Equality Act is, but we must also recognize that this isn't where we stop. America is still facing an increase in discrimination against not only sexual orientation, but also against race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and so much more. Harvard University found that 54% of Black Americans reported being discriminated against in pay, and 51% of Black Americans reported to have personally experienced someone using a racial slur against them. 31% of all women say that they have been discriminated against when applying for jobs due to their gender. And 60% of women aged 18 to 29 report that they, or a female family member, have been sexually harassed. We have made progress with change, but evidently there is still change to be made. We cannot just settle for what has already been done, but we must continue reaching towards progress and equality. Now, I can admit, I did just throw a lot of numbers at you. And I know that all of these numbers may seem scary, but there are two ways we can handle fear. We can either avoid it and be indifferent, or we can choose to face it. Let's look further into what these two options entail. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, to be indifferent is to be marked by a lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern for something. Or in other words, apathetic. If one is indifferent towards the issue of discrimination, that means that they are able to recognize the problem, but are choosing to ignore the implementation of the solution. We as a society often choose to be indifferent for one simple reason. It is easy. It is so much easier for us to just pretend that everything's fine and that discrimination isn't a serious issue, because the alternative option of facing our fears is much harder. However, if we do choose to face our fears, we may find ourselves wondering, how can I help make these numbers go down? And if I do speak out, how will others treat me? In order to make change happen, we have to speak out. But it's hard, especially when we're speaking out against those we're close to. We don't want those around us to think of us differently. We don't want them to stop talking to us or even to start discriminating against us. Change is scary, and it is hard, but if we wish to make change happen, we have to face our fears and put in the work. Now, I experienced this dilemma a couple months ago when I had to make the challenging choice of either being indifferent or choosing to face my fears to create a change. I was at work when I, a mere host who was one of the youngest employees at the restaurant, had to face a server who's about 5 years older than me. You can only imagine how scared I was. Now, this server repeatedly said racist, homophobic, and misogynistic comments. These comments always caught me by surprise, but what was even more surprising to me was the lack of backlash the server received. No one really stood up to the server, either out of fear or indifference. I was able to recognize that what the server was saying was wrong and that there was a change to be made. But just like the other employees, I was scared to voice this. However, while at work, I saw the value in change, which allowed me to overcome my fear to speaking out. I knew that I couldn't be indifferent. I knew that I couldn't stand silently and watch this man go around tearing people down for simply being people. I knew that I had to speak up. So the next time the server made one of his comments, I challenged him. We went back and forth for about 30 minutes, during which I thought we would make progress. The server thought otherwise. Every time I challenged or disagreed with something he said, he would just say that I wasn't listening to him or didn't understand his complex ideas. The server looked down on me, and he wouldn't hear me out because he only viewed me as a young, foolish girl. This upset me more than his discriminating words. I put myself out there, trying to make a change, and was torn down because of it. Change can be scary, because you may end up in a similar situation as me. You may be viewed differently or looked down upon, and this is what makes change hard. We have to work to accomplish it. We may not be successful every time we speak out. We may not change the entirety of society by standing up to one oppressor. We may not immediately change how others view the world, but it's important we try and we don't fall back to indifference, because one day we will make a difference. So, although change is scary and it is hard, we have to work together to face and overcome our fears. Civil rights activist James Baldwin says this. He says, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." That being said, we must overcome our fears and work together to make this change happen, because the benefits of change are too great to ignore. The only people that can do this is us. It is our duty to make this change happen. We cannot stand around waiting for someone else to make a change, because we may very well be that someone else. As Barack Obama said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. That being said, we must overcome our fears to make this change happen, because the benefits of change are too great to ignore. The worst thing we can be is indifferent. We cannot turn a blind eye or ignore the problems at hand. We must take action to make this change happen whenever and wherever we can. Elie Wiesel, a Jewish author, philosopher, and humanist, sees the danger in indifference and the power in speaking out. In Wiesel's words, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. When human lives are in danger, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Wherever men or women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. We cannot be indifferent. It is inhumane for us to be indifferent. A human is a human, no matter what their race, sex, religion, etc. is. So we have to work together, because the benefits of change are too great to ignore. Now, a prominent way that we can make this change is by simply being inclusive. If we show others that they are loved and that there is a safe place for them, we can make a huge impact on society. Even within the world of the LGBTQ+ community, inclusivity has proven to be impactful. According to the 2022 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health, 45% of members aged 13 to 24 heavily considered suicide that year. However, LGBTQ youth who felt high social support from their family reported attempting suicide at less than half the rate of those who felt low to moderate social support. So even though it is scary, I believe that we must work together to make this change happen and lower these numbers for the better. I know that I can overcome my fears of speaking out because I see the value in changing society to make America a safer place for people such as members of the LGBTQ community. I can see the value in change, which is fueling my ability to face and overcome my fears. I have realized that change is too beneficial to ignore or fear. So, an easy way for us to overcome our fears of speaking out is by seeing the value in change. If we can see the pain that discrimination causes, then we should be able to realize that we have no other option but to face our fears and make this change happen. Now, in order for us to see this value in change, we need to make these issues personal. I know that we may not all deal with the issue of discrimination in our everyday lives. We may not experience discrimination due to our race, sex, religion, etc. But this doesn't mean that the issues can't be personal. In fact, this issue may even already be personal to you, without you even realizing it. Someone we know, someone we claim to care about, could be experiencing discrimination. So we need to make these issues personal. And we can do so by being empathetic and putting ourselves in the shoes of others. If we can see that there are people out there, some of them being those we care about, are being discriminated against for simply being people, then we should be able to understand that this is not okay. We can change this by speaking out. So, even though it is scary, we must work together to overcome our fears with empathy. In order to make sure that this change happens, though, there are 3 steps we can follow to really implement. So the first step is to recognize the need for change by acknowledging the issues at hand. The second step is to overcome our fears of speaking out and avoid indifference. And the third step is to take action and speak out against discriminators, persecutors, and oppressors. If we can follow these steps, then we should be able to create change, brick by brick, eventually building the castle of equality. Now, if these steps seem like a lot, don't worry. I know we can do it. How do I know this? Because even within these past few minutes, we have already completed the first 2 steps. We have looked at the numbers and the amount of discrimination still taking place in America. And by doing so, we have recognized the issues and the need for change. Then, we went into how we can overcome our fears of speaking out by seeing the value in change and making these issues personal with empathy. Now, we must simply implement the third step. I know that this one is the hardest one. Like I previously said, speaking out can be hard, but this is why we need to start small. If we start small by simply being inclusive towards those who are discriminated against, we can hopefully learn to speak out, creating a snowball effect of change. So my challenge to all of us today is to implement these steps in our lives to create a change. It can be small, such as including others in our conversations, or it can be bigger, like standing up to oppressors. Now, you may be wondering, why am I here today, telling you all of this? Am I here to further persuade you to see the value in change? Am I here to tell you a few stories about myself and the change I've experienced? Am I here to challenge you with a call to action? While the answer to all of these questions is yes, I have another answer that is much more simple. I'm here today because this is a change for me. When I told my parents I was going to be giving a TED Talk, they were proud but confused as to how I found the courage to do this. My mom reminded me of who I was as a little girl, someone terribly scared to even tell the server that they got my order wrong, or tell my friends which piece of candy or toy I really wanted. I wasn't able to speak up for myself. My mom asked how I changed to be able to be here, now, on stage giving a TED Talk. And here's the answer, Mom. I now see the value change has. I'm not gonna lie, being up here is very scary for me, but I believe that I must make these changes in my life in order to fight back against discrimination. I believe that you can do the same. So whatever change it may be, big or small, it's important we try to make it happen. We can make a difference by recognizing the issues and the need for change, by facing our fears and speaking out, by being empathetic and making these issues personal. And finally, by avoiding indifference and taking action to speak out against discrimination. That being said, changing the world, or even just our country, isn't something that can be done by one person. We must work together to create a change and accomplish our goals of establishing equality for all through inclusivity. Thank you.